The New York Giants have a lot of roster holes to fill, but what is the best route to find the people to fill those holes? I'll run down my list and tell you which way I would go, draft, free agency, or maybe another route. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into our Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast part of your day. And I hope everybody had a really great weekend. On today's show, the Giants have a ton of needs. I mean, look, this is a franchise that is coming off a franchise worst 3-14 record last season. They've got a bunch of roster holes that were exposed, including probably some that we didn't even think existed until injuries or lack of performance hit them. So I'm going to go down that list of needs. Obviously, some of them you're going to know, some of them maybe you're going to not know or not be aware of. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on what the best way to approach those needs are, whether it's the draft, whether it's free agency, whether it's somebody on their own roster. So we'll just run down the whole list and see the best course of action for the Giants as things currently stand. Now, obviously, this can change once we get into free agency, and it will change some stuff up, but this is how things stand as of the dead of the quiet period post season. So let's get started. All right, we're going to go with the obvious needs first: quarterback, interior defensive line, and cornerback. And I'm going to start with quarterback. If I'm being honest with you, and I hope you guys would know by now that I'm always honest with you, I am not a huge fan of this draft class. I feel like there's really three guys, Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, who are worthy of first-round draft grades, and not necessarily top 5 picks, but, first-round draft grades. For me, if I'm the Giants, look, I think they will draft a quarterback. I think they have to draft a quarterback. I mean, quite honestly, they should have done it last year. I've said this many, many times. They did not. Even if they had taken a flyer on a Spencer Rattler, which I was banging the table for, or, an undrafted free agent, they just totally didn't dip into that class. And that class was really, really deep. This year, the pickings are slim in the draft. This is a bad year for a quarterback needy team to need a signal caller, because the options are just really not there. And depending on who you listen to, who you read, a lot of these quarterbacks that are in this year's class would rank behind some of last year's guys, right? For example, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, they would be 1, 2, and 3. They were part of this year's class. So that to me is a bit of a concern. Now, that being said, if you're the Giants, you can't go back and stuff that toothpaste back into the tube. What's done is done. You got to look at the current class for what it's worth, and you've got to have a certain degree of can Brian Dable take a quarterback that is maybe not, as polished as those guys last year, those top 3, and turn him into a viable signal caller. So that being said, I do think that the Giants plan to address the quarterback. They're going to get a veteran free agent, okay, whether it's Matthew Stafford via trade, or Justin Fields, or Jimmy Garoppolo, or Russell Wilson. That guy is going to do the heavy lifting this year. And if they do take a rookie, which I think they should and probably will, let the kid sit until you can work on smoothing out some of the rough edges in his game. I think that's going to be the best course of action for the Giants at the quarterback position. Now, there is a possibility the Giants say, you know what? we're not crazy about this class. Let's trade down. Let's get more picks and let's see where we're at next year with a deeper class. To that, I would say this. If I'm the Giants, draft a quarterback this year. And if you're in a position to draft one again next year, do it. All right. Because chances are, are you going to bring back Tommy DeVito next year? Probably not. So why not have a couple of developmental prospects if need be? The one that you would take this year obviously will be further along. And maybe you can, get him to the point where he's either starting and then the veteran becomes the backup or vice versa. So I would look to draft this year. I would look to free agent this year. And next year, if you're in a position to draft again, do it. Okay. Interior defensive line. Now, I felt that one of the problems with the interior defensive line is that they traded away Leonard Williams and they never really replaced him. So they also had some veteran guys that they lost. Ashawn Robinson, they traded away Jordan Phillips, and they rolled with youth. That said, the youth that they rolled with was primarily day 3 picks and onward. This is a very deep class for interior defensive linemen. All right. I would go draft all day, every day for this year to restock a defensive lineman. I think the Giants can get a good defensive lineman to pair up with Dexter Lawrence on day 2. I don't think I would go the free agency route here for that particular need on the team. Cornerback. This is a big one. Okay. I have said all along that Deonte Banks, they tried to get him to CB1 status. It didn't work out. I don't know that he is a CB1 if he's ever going to be that. I like the cornerback class in free agency. You've got DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward. You've got Carlton Davis. You have Byron Murphy. Yes, it is going to cost a lot to get a free agent cornerback. I understand that, but you know what? The Giants got the money to do it. So if they do nothing else as far as spending in free agency, spend on a quarterback and a cornerback. Get a guy in here who is a shutdown cornerback. That is, if you're not going with Travis Hunter. Now, if Travis Hunter is there and you have a chance to get him because you don't like, your options at 3 as far as quarterback goes, grab a Travis Hunter and project him as a cornerback. Otherwise, get yourself a veteran. And oh, by the way, even if you don't go cornerback at 3, if Hunter's off the board and you say, oh, we're going to sign, a veteran, why not take a flyer on a cornerback in day 3? I mean, you can never have too many corners, as we saw last year when the injuries started popping up. So I would most definitely maybe look at both. But for me, because I think the Giants really could use a CB1, I would go the free agency route if I'm the Giants. All right, coming up next, I've got another 3 positions. These are maybe not as pressing, but they're kind of what I would call sneaky needs. So we will talk about them right after this. Hey, Giant fans, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game so that even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, that's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are running down the list of the New York Giants offseason needs, and it's a lot. It's a lot. Let's not kid ourselves. There's very few positions that I think we can sit here and say that, oh, the Giants don't need to worry about it. And, as is the case usually every offseason, when you have as many needs as the Giants do, sometimes you got to prioritize what you absolutely positively have got to attack versus what can you let slide if you need to. And in my mind, there's some positions that they could probably let slide, not a whole lot, but there's probably one in this next group that I'm going to talk about, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. All right, but continuing onward, I want to start off with wide receiver. Now, the Giants, obviously, they have Malik Neighbors, who is a keeper. We still don't know what Jalen Hyatt is going to bring to the table. All right, 2 years in, and he's still kind of a question mark. Wandale Robinson appears to be a keeper, but his yards after catch last year, not very good. I think it was ranked last amongst receivers that had at least 50% of their pass targets. So I I would look to upgrade wide receiver two. Now, if the Giants can't get Darius Slayton back, and I would be very surprised if they do, if I'm the Giants, I look towards free agency. Now, this is going to be kind of tricky, but hear me out on this. Ideally, you want to have receivers on rookie deals, especially if, in a couple of years, you're going to have to, make a decision on Malik Neighbors, if you pick up his rookie option, which, right now there's no reason why they wouldn't, or if you extend him, which right now, again, no reason why they wouldn't. But this year's receivers class in the draft, to me, not as strong as past receiver classes. So, it's going to cost the Giants probably a significant amount of money to get a receiver too, because all these veterans are going to want to be paid like a receiver one. And I just don't think that, they're going to be able to do that. So, their options are, okay, do they finally say, okay, Jalen Hyatt, you're going to be our receiver too? You competed with Darius Slayton last summer. You didn't quite win out the job. This year, you're going to take that step forward, or it's claim the spot or bust, or do they bring in another receiver? What I think is going to happen is the Giants are going to look to give that position to Jalen Hyatt. Now, Hyatt's going to have to earn it. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not like they're going to gift wrap it and deliver it on a silver platter. But if I'm the Giants, I would probably look to sign a veteran, not somebody who's going to cost a whole lot, but get a low-cost veteran in here, if at all possible, that can eventually be that receiver too. And, even if you get a guy in here on a fairly inexpensive contract, you always have the performance incentives and, the adjustments that are made. If a guy signs for a certain amount and he outplays the number of snaps that, his contract anticipated. So you could always go that route if you need to. But receiver is definitely one of those sneaky needs, especially if Darius Slayton leaves. Now, if Slayton comes back, problem solved. Hopefully he comes back. I'm not so sure he will. I think he's going to get a really nice offer on the open market that the Giants probably are not going to want to match. And I'd hate to see him go. I really would, because, we talk about bleeding leadership. And although Darius Slayton has never been a captain, for him to walk out that door, that's like bleeding leadership all over again. And I really don't want to see that happen, but I have a feeling that is going to be what happens. All right. A sneaky need, you could say safety. Now, Jason Pinnock is going to be an unrestricted free agent. I am not convinced he is going to come back, even if an offer gets put on the table. So I do think that there are some decent players in the draft that if you want to really, have yourself a nice young secondary in that middle there, Tyler Newman, Dane Belton, who, by the way, I think Belton, I believe, is entering, I want to say the last year of his contract. Get a draft pick in there. Now, I do think the Giants will also bring in a low-cost veteran, maybe somebody who can play, safety and cornerback. But I'd like to see the Giants get a rookie in there. There's a couple guys, spoiler alert, I have a mock draft, coming out on New York Giants on SI that I wrote. And my second round pick, I believe, is a safety. So you'll have to just tune in and check that out tomorrow when it's up on New York Giants on SI. That'll be up on Tuesday, actually. So, all right. So safety. Now, another sneaky need, tight end. All right. Now, I've seen this mentioned quite often. I don't know how I feel about this, if I'm being honest with you. And I say that because the Giants have Theo Johnson, who it was clear last year that they wanted Theo Johnson to be their TE1. Chris Manhertz was a guy that Brian Dable liked a lot for his blocking. Manhertz is going to be a UFA. I could see the Giants potentially bringing him back on another short-term contract. And I wouldn't have a problem with that, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure what they have in Greg Dulcich, to be honest with you. I don't know if he'll be brought back. Maybe he'll be re-signed on or he'll be kept rather and have an opportunity to compete for a roster spot. But really the big mystery for me is Daniel Bellinger. Bellinger, when he was drafted initially, we thought, oh, the Giants had something there, someone to be excited about. And Bellinger has kind of faded from the scene to the point where, okay, now he's going into the final year of his contract. Will he be back beyond 2025? So if you like Bellinger's game, and it's not a horrible game that he plays, he's a decent enough blocker, but he's not as athletic, I think, as, a Theo Johnson. Do you look to upgrade at that position? And I think the Giants just might do that. This is a deep class for tight ends this year in the draft. And I think the Giants would consider drafting a guy. And if they do, now maybe they don't bring back Dulcich, or maybe they don't bring back Manhertz, although Manhertz is a blocker. And a lot of these tight ends in this class, blocking is not really their, bread and butter, so to speak. So tight end is definitely a position that I think the Giants are going to address. It is the sneaky need, or one of the sneaky needs on this team. And again, when you have a deep class, you'd be kind of, doing yourself a disservice if you don't consider dipping into that class. Even if even if you get like an undrafted free agent for, a roster spot, why not? Why not roll the dice? You never know what you're going to get out of it. I get it that the odds are a little, are stacked against an undrafted free agent, but stranger things have happened. So I would like to see the Giants dip into the tight ends class, which, as I said, is a deep class, and see if they just can't, fortify things, especially with Bellinger. His future just seems very shaky with the Giants. Is he going to be back once his contract is over, or is he going to move on? I wouldn't be shocked if he moves on. Good kid, works hard, not a bad athlete, but look, you got to be more than just a pass catcher. And his blocking wasn't horrible last year, but it did, after his rookie season, it did go backwards a little bit. And it was kind of telling that, they have now in 2 straight years, first it was acquiring Darren Waller, who was banged up and probably, in retrospect, at the end of his career. And then they go and they draft over Bellinger again with Theo Johnson. So that, if that doesn't tell you that maybe they're looking to, upgrade that position, I don't know what else will. All right. Coming up next, I have 2 more positions, one of which that I think is very important that the Giants will probably look to address. And then the other position that I have, this is one of those spots where if the Giants don't want to address it this year, they probably don't have to, although I probably would. So I will tell you what they are right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're taking a look at the New York Giants' biggest roster needs by position. Where do they go to fill these needs? Draft, free agency, trade, maybe even somebody already on the roster. And quite honestly, I don't think I've mentioned very many guys on the roster, because that's how thin the Giants are and how, shaky they are in terms of their own depth. they have a lot of needs. And, the 3-14 record, if that didn't tell you that they had a lot of needs, that I don't know what will. But all right, these last two positions that I want to talk about, I want to start off with offensive line. Now, I am of the opinion that every year the Giants should be bringing in offensive linemen. All right. You want to have guys in waiting in the wings so that in the event you have injuries, you now have guys who maybe are potentially ready to step in to fill in some of those gaps. Right. Now, this was a big mistake the Giants didn't have really last year when they had the injury to Andrew Thomas. They didn't really have a left tackle solution. All right. We all saw what happened. Joshua Zudo was tried there. Well, Joshua Zudo, struggled the year before at left tackle. What made them think he was going to be any better this year, or I should say, this past year? Then they went with career right tackles. Chris Hubbard, he didn't really pan out. And ultimately, they had to move Jermaine Illuminor over to left tackle. And, it was an excuse, I guess, to get Evan Neal in the lineup too. I'm not sure it was the best answer. So, look, for me, get guys in here, even if you're getting them in on day 3. Let Carmen Brasillo, let James Ferentz work with these guys, develop them. If after one season they say, you know what, this guy's not going anywhere, this guy has hit his ceiling, or, whatever the case may be, keep on drafting offensive linemen. Giants have just been so bad at drafting quality offensive linemen, this regime in particular, that it's scary. And if you don't address that offensive line, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. It doesn't matter who your receivers or running backs or tight ends are. You're not going very far. And we saw that with the Giants this past year. Now, they've got a very good offensive line coach combination, like I said, in Brasillo and Ferentz, but these guys need talent. And it's interesting because at one of the games, I ran into Chris Snee, who was hired by the Giants to help with scouting offensive linemen. And I know Chris very well from when he was, an active player. And we're very friendly when we see each other. And I walked past him and he stopped by to say hello. And I said, "Hey, Chris, how you doing?" So he was like, "Hey, doing good. How are you?" I said, "I'm doing fine, Chris, but I'd be doing a lot better if you would find some offensive linemen for this team." So he just kind of laughed and threw back his head. And he's like, "Okay, yeah, no pressure, right?" So, but seriously, I think that's a big reason why the Giants hired Christine, is because whatever scouting method or evaluation they might be doing, and, and I don't know if it's just strictly Carmen Brasillo. I can't see how Carmen Priscilla can do any kind of scouting when the season's going on and he's got to take care of the guys that he has. So they've hired Christine to be kind of like an offensive line expert. And I have all the confidence in the world that Snee's going to come up with some guys that I think they can turn into functional offensive linemen. At least I hope for whoever the quarterback is, for that person's sake. But yeah, I think Chris will do a good job with that. And, look, interior offensive line, just real quick. I think they're going to be okay there. I think they've got guys. They've got Austin Schlottman still under contract. He can play guard or center. Jake Kubas can play guard. He's also cross-trained at center. And then there's Evan Neal, who's entering the final year of his contract. And I'm pretty sure Evan Neal is going to cross-train at guard and maybe, be a guard tackle type of guy. I don't know that they're going to re-sign Greg Van Roten. I wouldn't mind it if they did. But yeah, I think they're okay along the interior. Now, where they definitely need the help, like I said, is offensive tackle, because they do not have a viable swing tackle. Is that guy Tyree Phillips? Phillips showed that he could do it, but, is that the guy you want to roll with moving forward? Or do you want to get somebody in here who's a little bit younger, maybe has a little higher ceiling? That's what the Giants need to decide as far as their offensive line goes. But that definitely has to be, in my opinion, one of the priorities this offseason. And I would go draft for that one. You have veterans already on the roster, I would go draft and start developing them so that they are ready in case they are needed. The last position I want to talk about, this one, if the Giants needed to punt on this one to next year, I don't think it would be a big deal, even though this year's class is really, really deep, and that is running back. All right. Now, the Giants, Tyrone Tracy Jr. is their RB1. They do have Devin Singletary coming back. Singletary does have guaranteed money, so he will be back. But beyond them, is Eric Gray the answer? I don't know. Is Dante Miller the answer? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I've got to see more from Eric Gray. I've got to see more from Dante Miller. But I really would not hate it if the Giants added another running back there to compete with these guys. Maybe a guy who can, eventually be the RB3 for this coming year. And then once Singletary's contract is up, maybe that guy now advances to RB2. So I would, if I'm the Giants, I would definitely look to see about dipping into the draft class, which again is very deep at running back. But that being said, the other needs that I've talked about throughout this show do kind of, I think are a little bit more pressing. And I haven't even touched on, edge rusher, which I'll get to in a moment. But running back is a deep class. And if you can get one, even as an undrafted free agent, why not? Because, you put them on the practice squad and develop them, and now you've got a guy waiting in the wings for next year. I mentioned edge rusher. The team is going to likely lose Azeez Ojulari. So that will leave them with Kayvon Thibodeau. That will leave them with Brian Burns. Thibodeau, I really don't know what to make of his future here. I do think they will pick up his option year, the decision of which has to be made by, I believe it's May 1st. Does he have a long-term future here, though? That, I think the jury is still out. I really do. I mean, there are times I think yes, and there are times that I say, nah, he's got to develop his game a little bit more. And I don't know what the long-term future holds for him, but I will say this. If you look at what Joe Schoen has done, the guys that are the real deal, the Dexter Lawrences and the Andrew Thomases, those guys, they were extended before they, got into before their market value went up. Would Joe Schoen do that with Kayvon Thibodeau? I don't think it'll be this year. Might it be next year if they pick up the option year, which is going to cost them some upwards of $16 million? It's possible, but I think the jury is still out. I think this year is going to be a very big year for Kayvon Thibodeau. He needs to stay healthy, and he needs to show a little bit more in terms of alternate moves when he gets stonewalled. This is a decent enough class, a decent enough draft class. If you want to get a young pass rusher, I would not go the free agency route because that will cost you an arm and a leg. I know there was a report that mentioned Osa Odigizua, who I think is with the Cowboys, as a possibility for the Giants. I don't see that happening. I would say if you are concerned about the draft, or I would say if you're concerned about the depth at that position, and there's a case to be made about the depth, go and draft a guy if you can. Even if it's a day 2, day 3, early day 3 pick, go that route. It's going to cost you a lot less. You're going to get somebody who's a lot hungrier, especially the lower down you go in the draft. And who knows, you might just get just as good, if not better results than if you were to sign a guy who, once he gets his money, just kind of does his thing and, the edge is not there. All right, Giant fans, that is my outline, my plan, if you will. So I want to thank you for tuning in, as always, to the Locked On Giants podcast. Appreciate you spending part of your day with me. Don't forget to keep it here all week long. We'll have more new episodes here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Until tomorrow, have a fantastic day.